whatever you have calculated into your life as acceptable risk, as inevitable risk, I'm just here to tell you to recalibrate that. Frankly, the country needs you to recalibrate that because, broadly speaking, there's no room for you in the hospital anymore. What you need to know is that whoever is the most important person in your life, whoever you most love and most care for and most cherish in the world, that's the person who you may lose.
Good morning and welcome back to AM Joy. I am Jason Johnson. Rachel Maddow's emotional plea this Thursday was amazing television, amazing journalism, and something we should all listen to. As coronavirus surges out of control in nearly every single corner of the country, it looks like spaghetti has been spread all over the U.S. map. This morning, the number of cases in the U.S. has topped 12 million. The CDC is pleading with people to not travel for the Thanksgiving holiday. But 40% of Americans plan to attend a Thanksgiving dinner with 10 people or more, potentially creating super spreader events all over the country. So with just days to go before America's favorite holiday, I'm urging you not to be the turkey who puts your loved ones at risk. Joining me now to discuss, Dr. Mercedes Carnathan, professor of preventive medicine, Northwestern University, Dr. Madeline Tully, family physician and Milwaukee coordinator for the Committee to Protect Medicare, Midwin Charles, civil trial and criminal defense attorney, Naira Hawk, host of the Global Experience on SiriusXM and former State Department advisor, and Jelani Cobb, staff writer for The New Yorker and MSNBC political analyst. I will start with Dr. Carnathan. There is a recent stat that just came out that says 1 in 15 people in Chicagoland could potentially be infected with the coronavirus. What on earth needs to be told to people in Metro Chicago to make them realize that there is no turkey worth going to see and risking your life this Thanksgiving?
Jason, thank you for pointing that out. The situation in multiple cities and regions in the country is similar to what's going on here in Chicago. I think what has really challenged people is all along, it has felt like somebody else's problem and that the people I know can't have it and we should all be okay. Unfortunately, that is such a miscalculation. The people you know do have it. When that many people have it, everybody is one step away from an exposure. So that person who you think has been safe, they may be interacting with people through their essential work and essential roles who are putting them at risk. So you really can't know just what you're bringing to your table. I know people want to get together. It is important for people's mental wellness, but it's just not safe. And if you can delay and do it next year, that's better.
Dr. Tully, I want you to listen to this soundbite from Dr. Fauci on Thursday and what he is saying we need to think about. I want to get your comments on the other side.
We need to actually double down on the public health measures as we're waiting for that help to come, which will be soon. We'll be getting vaccine doses into people at high priority at the end of December. I've used that metaphor that the cavalry is on the way. If you're fighting a battle and the cavalry is on the way, you don't stop shooting. You keep going until the cavalry gets here, and then you might even want to continue fighting.
Dr. Tully, clearly the cavalry has been stuck. It's like that scene in Blazing Saddles where they couldn't get through the gate. But we're running into some serious challenges right now. Do you think enough people at the local level are listening to what Dr. Fauci is saying, even in this sort of huge upsurge that we've seen?
I think that people have been listening, but in fact, they've become a little more used to, maybe I never got it, so what I've been doing seems to be okay. But when we look at the numbers, it's not okay. And we do need to, each of us, make sure we're wearing a mask, we're wearing it properly, so it's covering both our nose and our mouth, that we're doing that in public, and we're also doing it in semi-public, semi-private spaces. So, for example, I'm going to be dropping off some food to my parents if we're doing a food exchange this Thanksgiving instead of gathering together. And I'm going to make sure I have my mask on when I exchange that food with them. When I take my children somewhere, if my children are older, but if I was dropping my kids off at a daycare, I want to make sure that I'm wearing my mask. So in case I have corona, that I'm not exposed to those teachers. washing our hands, using our hand sanitizer, and really making sure that we're not making as extra trips. We're not shopping just for fun. We're really trying to limit our exposure out in the public. And that's hard.
Jelani, I want to point this out. Thanksgiving has evolved in America, just like Christmas, right? At one point, Christmas was a time where rich people opened up their houses for people to come in and get stuff. Thanksgiving has changed over time as well. I know in my family, I know several people who call it colonizer Christmas because they don't really like the idea of what Thanksgiving represents. From a cultural and a historic standpoint, is it really that much of a disruption that we should maybe back off of Thanksgiving this year? Haven't we had other times where major holidays had to change because the nation was facing crisis?
Sure. Or if you even think about it, that original Thanksgiving, where the colony was starving and, anthropological research suggests was in such dire conditions they had to resort to cannibalism to remain alive. It always has been kind of awkward to say that you commemorate that by stuffing yourself with as much food as you can find. That maybe perhaps people actually think about a small sacrifice that would be, fitting in keeping with this day. The other part of it is I think that, we've seen at different points, where people step forward and ask the public to sacrifice on behalf of a larger cause. World War I, certainly World War II, people saw those kinds of things during the Civil War. This pandemic has presented that same sort of challenge, and I'm not sure that people have really kind of grappled with it in that way. And just one quick point to the doctor's point, I think a friend of mine who is an ER physician in Chicago told me that he is gathering with his family. They're meeting outdoors. They're going to go for a socially distant walk. All of them are going to walk together, and then they're going to divide up the food and eat at home while being in contact on Zoom. I think that there are ways that we can respond to this creatively to still get the kind of family support and the kind of emotional connection that we need around these times, and say that there's nothing written in stone. Like, all of these holidays are invented in some way, shape, or form. There's nothing written in stone about the way that you have to recognize them.
Exactly. Look, nobody says Thanksgiving has to have turkey. Nobody says Thanksgiving has to have mac and cheese, although if you don't have that, I won't come. I want to bring this up. There's suggestions out there for how to have a nice, socially distanced Thanksgiving, a way for people to stay safe. And Midwin, when you look at this, and you look at how different kinds of communities really relish Thanksgiving. I know for a lot of folks, Thanksgiving might be the only time of year that the entire family can get together. Do you think that these suggestions are going to work? Do you think that people are actually going to pay attention to maybe having a Zoom party or walking around outside? Or do you think folks are pretty much stubborn and are going to do whatever they want?
I hope so. I mean, I think one of the biggest problems that we're facing with this pandemic is that America for a long time has lionized the individual. For the longest, as soon as you're born, you're told in America that you can do what you want, when you want, and how you want to do it. And the problem with that, unfortunately, we're seeing play out with this pandemic is that people aren't recognizing that what they do affects their neighbor. It affects someone that they may not even know. And so it's my hope that people take those recommendations and understand that, live for another Thanksgiving, live for another Christmas. 2020, just wrap it up and understand that if you take precautions right now, you can make it possible to be around for 2021. I also think that a large part of the population, at least for now, has not had to experience watching the funeral of a loved one on Zoom. They have not had to experience bringing a loved one to the hospital and dropping them off at the door because they're not able to go in with them. And this goes for people who are sick with other ailments. It's important and I think imperative for people to understand that if we continue to overwhelm the medical system right now, if your loved one gets in a car accident, has a heart attack, has cancer, it's going to be very difficult for them to get care. So this isn't just about coronavirus. This is also about other health ailments that we may suffer as a population. So it's time for America to get over themselves and understand that what you do has a direct impact on just about everyone else, people that you may not even know.
That is a huge point because, again, the regular kinds of things that can happen during the holidays, you know, like your uncle burns himself when he's trying to fry the turkey, or people get into car accidents on the way there. These are the kinds of things that can also be stopped because the hospitals are filled with people suffering from COVID. I want to go to Naira. So, Naira, your family has recently expanded, and I know that's an exciting time of year. But I also know that you probably have lots of different kinds of people who say, hey, I want to visit, I want to see family, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think just sort of socially, and also as you talk to people when you host your radio show, what are the kinds of things that people need to say to their family members to shut down Thanksgiving? I know this is sensitive for a lot of people. Telling your aunts, telling your uncles, telling your parents they can't come can cause a lot of conflicts. What are some things that you've heard people say that can possibly sort of tamp down that tension?
I have kept top of mind this idea as a parent and as a family member, safety first. And that is my number one priority. I was pregnant for the first half of this quarantine COVID situation and then had a newborn for the rest of it. So baby girl is now 4 months old. She has not met an entire side of her family because they live in California. So that's actually the side of the family we used to spend Thanksgiving with. She has not met siblings, my siblings, and it's very, very isolating at a time when usually babies are moments that people come together and you can pass the baby around. We're not doing that. And the reason why is not because suddenly I have a better sense of what's going on than everybody else and I'm a better person. It's literally because I read a story that struck me cold when I read it. It is a story of Camila Graciano, who was in Brazil over the summer. She was 8 months pregnant. She had been really great about isolating herself and protecting herself. And her husband and sister decided they wanted to throw her a surprise baby shower with a small group of like 10 or 15 people, which at that time the government allowed. Well, she ended up not making it. And the baby had to be born by an emergency C-section because the mother got COVID and never met her child. So I hear stories like that, and I think, oh my God, the number one priority right now is safety. Nothing else matters. I would have rather that all of us be around and be able to build these family bonds for the long term rather than right now in this moment.
Thank you for that. I can't impart upon people enough that I want you to be afraid. And I know that's something terrible and I'll end up getting mean for it, but I want you to be afraid, if not for yourself, then for the other people in your life. Dr. Tully, when we look at what could happen, and we have a great visual here of Sky Harbor in Arizona, and we have O'Hare Airport. We see these pictures and these photos of all of these people crowding airports, traveling, et cetera, et cetera. What are going to be the hardcore numeric consequences? Are we going to see the results of this travel? Is it going to be a week? Is it going to be 2 weeks? Is it going to be by Christmas that we're seeing sort of another spike in deaths? What are the hardcore numbers that we could face if people don't listen and they continue to travel and see family for the Thanksgiving holiday?
Well, what we know is that of the people who are getting tested, about 1 out of 6 in a state that's not doing so poorly, and sometimes maybe 1 out of 3 of those people are testing positive. So even if someone is wearing a mask, if you're standing in an area where there's 100 people, if you can imagine, 10, 15 of them have COVID. And so even if you are wearing a mask, even if they're wearing a mask, if you're standing there for more than 10 minutes, there's a pretty good chance that you're going to be exposed and may then carry the disease without symptoms or get minor symptoms, and you pass it along and pass it along and pass it along. So that's the problem, is that asymptomatic spread. And just look around. If you don't like doing numbers like 1 out of 6, just say 1 out of 5. That means 20 of those folks that you're standing in a crowd with have COVID. So that's a lot.
Yeah.
And 10 minutes with a mask, even a very good mask, is about the limit to keep yourself somewhat protected. And after that, there's a pretty high chance that you're going to be exposed enough to get it yourself.
Very quickly for Dr. Conathan. So the holiday season can lead to a tremendous amount of depression. We see sort of increases in suicide, depression, suicidal thoughts. Some of those things happen because people have seen their families, and sometimes that happens because we're not going to see our families. Very quickly, what are some suggestions you have for people who may be suffering, who may be lonely, who may be dealing with depression, who are not going to see their families this year? What are some outlets and some resources that they might be able to draw upon?
So
I'm very pleased you brought that up. And I really like the suggestions earlier from the co-panelists, which suggest ways to get together, but not to make the meal the highlight. And I would say if we could all commit to getting together, to reaching out to somebody who may be isolated or lonely, invite them to a telephone conversation, invite them to a video conference, show support. You know, there are ways that we can be together in safer situations outside. There are ways in which committing to connecting via the telephone is critically important, because mental health is very important, and mental health is part of one's overall health profile. And things have been extremely stressful and hard for so many people. So while we say don't get together, we don't mean don't come together. We can delay Thanksgiving and have a universal happy Thanksgiving once we can get to the end of this critical period of time.
That's extremely important. Look, folks, reach out and touch someone through the phone, through Zoom. There's lots of things you can do. Mercedes Carnifon, Madeline Tully, Midwin Charles, Naira Hawk, Jelani Cobb, thank you all so much. Next up, once again, Stephen Miller, the Gargamel of the Trump administration, proves cruelty still the point.